to the Coach's Corner. Today, we're going to mix it up a little bit. So we've got a few staff members behind the scenes, the camera guys, etc., who have kind of got into triathlon recently. The bug's bitten them, so to speak. And while we've been filming our videos lately, we've been pretty much bombarded with questions from them about everything you can think of. And we thought, rather than just constantly answering their questions personally, we'd answer them here in Coach's Corner, so you guys can get the benefit of our answers at the same time.
It's like they've never actually listened to our videos.
It does seem a bit like they don't watch anything that we make.
This isn't just for them, this one's for you, because there are actually, in all seriousness, some very good questions there. So first of all, starting with Ollie. Now Ollie is actually planning to do his first 70.3 later this year. He's actually come from a very, very good swimming background, but obviously he's got into cycling and running since, and now the tri bug has bitten him. So he's asked, he did the half marathon plan that we did last year, and he said he did that with success, but this volume could be a killer when he starts adding the bike and the swim to it. Which sessions are essential from it, and is it okay to target a lower volume, or should I go the other way and prioritize volume and time in the legs with more zone 2 and zone 3 running? Very specific, Ollie.
He's gone into some depth. Basically, I think what he's asking is, how do I add the biking and swimming to his already running program? And the initial answer to that is don't. You don't want to add swimming and biking to your running program and call it a triathlon program. That's not a triathlon program. It's a running program that you're not going to manage. So what you want to do is isolate the key. You can use that half marathon base training program as your base. But then you need to isolate the important sessions in that program, maybe 3 a week. Keep those in your program and then add the other stuff before you add in any more extra running on top of that. So you're going to pare down both the volume and intensity of that running program a little bit. And then you can start adding in the triathlon training. I don't think it's a good idea to just throw in swimming and biking on top of a half marathon program that you already found challenging the first time.
Yeah, not going to find much time for anything else either. He follows on to say, how do you structure a training week? Probably will swim once a week. What are the key day sessions and where do they go in the week? He says he's a very flexible person and likes mornings. Well, that's good to hear, Ollie.
It'll definitely help being a triathlete liking morning.
Obviously, it's quite a broad question, but generally, in terms of kind of the intensity, you never really want to be adding intensity upon intensity. And what I mean by that, as a triathlete, we quite often end up having to do multiple sessions per day. So don't go doing a hard swim in the morning, then a hard bike in the afternoon. You probably want to complement that hard swim with an easier ride. Same goes for even if you are doing single disciplines or single activities per day. You don't want to do a hard workout on the Tuesday, then a hard workout on the Wednesday. Try and just space things out and give your body time to recover and adapt from them.
Exactly. And he follows on with one more question, which is, how does he find the motivation to get back in the water? Obviously, he's come from a swimming background, but it's been a while since he spent a lot of time in the water. And I think everyone struggles with this question, or this challenge, because when you've been out of the water for a long time, you lose that feel for the water. When you first get back in, it's just not fun for a while. The simple answer to that is you have to just persevere for a few weeks. It doesn't take very long. You'll get that feeling back, you'll get a bit of fitness, and suddenly the swimming will become quite an enjoyable part of your program. And you have to remember, of course, that the aerobic benefits of swimming transfer really well to the biking and running. So don't see it just as your swim training for a portion of the triathlon that you're going to find fairly easy anyway. It's training for all 3 disciplines, so it's well worth putting in the effort to get into the pool.
Yeah, he does actually have one final question. I actually quite like this one because I think a lot of people relate to this. He says, I'm going to one of my best mate's weddings in the middle of August, and obviously he has this big event coming up. Could I train up to this with an intense block, use the wedding as an easy recovery week, and then kick on after? Now, just generally speaking, I would say you should always make sure that your training fits around your life, not the other way round. I think a lot of people just get this ideal program and just try and make it work, and it shouldn't work. You want to make sure it's consistent and works with your life. Now, going into something like this, yes, of course, you want to enjoy life. You want to make sure you go to your mate's wedding and not miss it for training. But I would probably advise against doing a super intense block in the lead up to it, because that's just a very, well, it's a recipe for disaster. You could end up burning yourself out. It is sensible to perhaps just adapt the training a little bit, factor in a couple of easy days over that wedding, but don't go all guns blazing a week before. Just be sensible with it, restructure the week, and all should be good. This
is a common question and a common challenge for time-pressed athletes. Things come up in your life and they mess up the perfect training program. You can't have your recovery week exactly where you wanted it. And cramming training because you know you've got an easy weekend coming up is not the answer. Ideally, your program is already pushing you to your adaptation limit. So pushing a little bit further because you've got an easy 3 days coming is just risking injury and burnout. So stick to your program right up until that weekend. Take that easy weekend, enjoy your mate's wedding as much as you can, maybe not too much, and then get straight back into your training program afterwards without skipping too much or adding too much or trying to compensate too much for it.
Yeah, and I think this also is the same for training camps. Get people suddenly booking a week in Mallorca and going crazy and cycling like a pro cyclist for a week. Obviously fantastic, great fun, make the most of it, but yeah, you also want to be careful in those instances. Now moving on to Quinn, who well, what is Quinn doing? I mean, he's just seriously got into running lately and just seems to be interested in everything we're doing. He's quite new to GTN.
He's definitely a bit about a bug. We're not sure what bug it is, but a triathlon bug, a running bug, I'm not sure. He was talking about tennis the other day, but I'm not sure we can help him with that.
I'll try. He's brilliant though. It's great that he's got the bug. Now, he's asked, what is the optimal amount of time for a training plan? Now, do you want to hit this one?
Well, what he means is how long out from a goal event should you start your program? And that's a bit like asking how long is a piece of string. It depends where you're starting and where you want to get to for your race. But there are some key principles you can focus on. You don't want to be so time pressed that you cram in, like we said, that your ramp rate is too high and you really are risking injury or burnout or illness even. But you also don't want to start your program so far out that after 2 months of being really motivated and fired up, your race is still 2 months away and you actually like, it's too far away for me to even focus on.
That's why I always leave it till about 2 weeks out.
Maybe don't do what Mark does, but somewhere in the middle there. Around 10 to 12 weeks is generally ideal if you're starting with a decent amount of fitness. If you have a major goal but you're not very fit, maybe take a month or two to build up fitness to the point that you can start a program. Basically, you're training for the training program, and then you can kick into the actual training program for the event, get your motivation, get fired up, and start hitting those accurate sessions every time. 12 weeks is probably ideal. Erring towards a side of 8 weeks if you're quite fit, 16 weeks if you're not so fit, but don't go much further than that because you will get stale and bored without any intermediate goals in between.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, despite a lot of panic training from myself for things.
Do what he says, not what he does.
Also asked, would you suggest training for sprint triathlons initially, then building up the distance, maybe to 70.3s. In short, yes, I always think it's a great idea to start with shorter distances, kind of just get the hang of things, but also use them almost for training towards that bigger and longer event. So even if you have entered an Ironman or a 70.3, I would still recommend in your season actually planning in some sprint distances, Olympic distances prior to that, almost to go through the motions, sometimes just blow the cobwebs out, figure things out, try out nutrition, and then hopefully that'll really prepare you well. But also if you're just starting out in the sport, definitely would, if you can, recommend just building up and finding your feet slowly.
If nothing else, it'll make you less nervous when your actual big race does come around because you've invested a lot more in a 70.3, for example. You don't want it to go sideways just because of nervousness, and a lot of that will get dissipated by just doing a few shorter things that don't really matter.
Little things like you might realise in the sprint distance that actually you struggle to take your wetsuit off. So then actually you can go and practice that rather than during your 70.3 spending 10 minutes in transition with a zip that's jammed. Anyway, next question.
If he wants to get faster in running, does he need a specific training plan, or can that be included in his general triathlon plan? Obviously, ideally, your general triathlon plan will be trying to make you a faster swimmer and a faster biker and a faster runner. But if you have a strength like running is your strength already, you might err on the side of putting the effort into the swimming and the biking, and your run times might not actually get any faster. You're just building the strength to do it off the bike. And then you won't necessarily be reducing your run times. But you need to speak to your coach about this, or build a program specifically around your goals. If your goal is to do a triathlon, absolutely, you need to focus on all 3 disciplines and get them all to roughly the same strength. If your goal is to run a fast 5K in a triathlon, then certainly you can focus a bit more on the run, focus on some specific sessions for that 5K, and build your program around a bit of a running focus while you do some swimming and biking.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Final question from Quinn. How many goals do you tend to assign to each discipline in an effective training plan, or do you not apply any? I.e. quicker time, more stamina, etc. Well, initially, yes, I think all of us kind of will think of this big goal of faster time or whatever. But actually that can be almost a little bit overwhelming. And if you're doing, as we've said, a 12, 16 week training plan, that goal also can sometimes get a little bit stale. It's so far away, it doesn't seem real. So actually it's really good to set these smaller goals. I think you call it macro goals. Is that the official term? I don't know. Anyway, so you've got these smaller goals that you are actually ultimately helping you towards that larger macro goal, but something that you can kind of chip away at through time. Equally, though, I wouldn't suggest you get so hung up on these goals. At the end of the day, you want to enjoy the sport, and actually through enjoyment, you'll ultimately probably perform better. So it's finding that balance, making sure you do go out and just enjoy training rather than constantly looking at numbers and monitoring yourself against these goals that you set yourself.
Yeah, setting a process goal that everything hinges on when it doesn't actually matter in the grander scheme of your big result is a recipe for failure. Basically, you might not hit that, and all your motivation is going to disappear right when you're doing a hard week of training. Then you're better off not having set that goal at all. But if you can focus on the major goal and just kind of take those results as they come, then definitely process goals along the way are a great idea.
Definitely. Okay, and finally, Jonty, who is kind of an avid triathlete, but he's just a little like Quinn actually. He sort of does everything, and I believe he's getting into doing sort of his first proper triathlon this year. So first question, I'll fire this one to you, James. I lose so much time on a tumble turn that it's putting me off doing them at all. I don't know if it's technique or lack of popping my head up that's tiring me out and slowing me down.
Well, first thing, I would direct him to our Tumble Turn video.
You'd hope you'd have watched that one.
Make sure you're doing it, which you'd think you would have watched, but maybe click on the Tumble Turn video and you can watch that. Once you've done that, the Tumble Turn is an important aspect of swim training. It's not important obviously in a triathlon because you're not going to tumble turn in a triathlon, but it teaches you breath control, it teaches you that continuous swimming, and you're able to actually work on your aerobic conditioning a lot better because you're holding your breath there at the end of every length, you're swimming more continuously for longer, but it's not vital. It's not something that you should not get in the water because you can't do it. It's not something where you should not train for a triathlon because you can't do it. You can do the touch turns. In fact, if it's going to put you off swimming, just don't do it for a while. One of the ways you can do this, if you are struggling or finding that it's putting you off, or even it's preventing you from swimming continuously, is to only tumble turn on one side of the pool. It gives you a little break on the other side. It gives you something to focus on. It gives you a bit more time to build yourself up to that goal, that tumble turn, and then you can catch your breath for a bit longer. Do it again on the next one. Even if you only tumble turn in every 2 or 3 lengths, it's a good way to build up your tumble turning. And before you know it, it'll be comfortable and you'll be tumble turning every length.
Yeah, really good. Also, if you don't fancy watching our video for whatever reason, one little tip, just trickle breath out through your nose throughout. Don't let go of all of it suddenly, and also don't hold your breath. It should just be a trickle out through your nose. That's probably the most common question or thing that I tell people, like, and it really clicks for them. So I would really recommend that. Moving on, how can I make the most out of a 20-meter pool for Ironman training? It's short, and I find that most of my length is completed after the push-off. Now, I actually do a lot of my swimming in a 20-meter pool.
Yeah, it's quite a common problem, especially now with COVID and not so many pools are open. Some of the bigger ones are definitely closed. But even so, often that's the only thing that's available.
Yeah.
But it is doable. I've trained almost exclusively for Ironmans in 20-meter pools. It is doable. You you need to adjust your expectations a little bit, and your preparation a little bit, but you also need to understand that you can train for swimming using very short reps and lots of them. It's not quite like running, where to train for a marathon you have to do a long run. You can do 100 20-meter lengths with a push-off every time, and everyone will be in a better stroke and better breathing technique than you would have if you were just doing 100 lengths backwards and forwards continuously. So there's a lot of benefit in swimming to actually just swim in short reps, and if you're in a short pool, make the most of it and work on your stroke and do those short reps. Take a short break, 3-5 seconds, push off again. It does work your aerobic system, but you do get that breath. You can push off again. You don't have to worry about how long the pool is, but you're working on your technique and your stroke at the same time.
Now moving on to the bike. I ride a hybrid bike with little to offer in terms of aerodynamics. How can I best optimize my position to make the most out of my ride or the bike? Well, firstly, it doesn't matter what bike you're using, particularly when you're starting out in a triathlon. I'd say that the main goal is just completing the triathlon, having fun, and then potentially, if you wanted, moving on from there and upgrading. You can make the most out of a hybrid bike, but ultimately you want to make sure you're comfortable. So don't go doing anything severe to the bike and adapting the position. Just make sure you're comfortable. You can apply power and pressure through the pedals. You can, of course, reduce that frontal area whilst you're on a hybrid bike, and that is going to improve the aerodynamics and ultimately the amount of effort you're going to have to put out for the same speed. But as I said, don't go doing anything drastic that's then going to affect your power output and your enjoyment of the bike.
Exactly. His follow-on question is also related to, that first bike that people use for their first triathlon. He says, I use flat pedals as I ride with my running shoes ready to go for the run leg. At what point does it become faster to have clip-ons and change shoes in T2 rather than just hopping off and running straight in my running shoes? This is quite a common question. The answer really comes down to practice. When you are efficient on clipless pedals on a bike, you're going to get much better power transfer, much more efficient pedal stroke using clipless pedals, and that is going to translate to much faster bike time. Initially, everyone just pushes down in the front anyway, and if you're used to those flat pedals, it's not going to make much difference. But once you've practiced a bit, you'll notice the difference and you'll never go back to flat pedals. Similarly, it comes to practice of getting your feet out of those pedals, getting out of those shoes and getting into the run shoes on T2. Once you've nailed that, and it only takes you 10, 15, 20 seconds, you're going to gain more than that in the bike leg, putting on clipless pedals. And then it's an easy no-brainer. Your overall triathlon time will be faster in proper bike shoes versus your sneakers on flat pedals.
Well, talking of which, he actually goes on to say, I find the first half of my run, or a triathlon run, really challenging as my body feels as though it's in recovery from the cycle. However, I'm left with surplus energy coming into finish. How do I better control my energy expenditure so that this doesn't happen? Well, in short, you can never really get rid of that horrible feeling when you come off a hard bike ride. Your legs are always going to feel a little bit rubbish. That said, doing things like brick sessions, where you're simply going from one discipline to the next in quick succession and continuously, can help, and also just prepare you for what it feels like, so you can deal with it better, your form may be better, and so on. There is a little trick that I used to use, particularly during duathlons, is just towards the end of the bike ride, you just start increasing your cadence a little bit so it's more in line with the running cadence, because typically we all sort of tend to, if we're riding solo, we're sort of pumping out and churning the pedals a little bit, and your cadence will be a lot slower than you're going to then move your legs on the run. So just starting to turn the legs over a little bit quicker, maybe coming off the power a little bit, but try not to too much, and that'll just hopefully prepare you so you're not suddenly in total shock when you jump off the bike. But yeah, I don't know if you've got anything more to add to that.
Well, interestingly, in his question, he alludes to that he thinks it's an energy expenditure thing where he just can't get the energy out and then it comes kicking in later on in the run. It's definitely not an energy expenditure thing. Once you've run out of energy, you're out of energy. It doesn't just suddenly come back in the second half of the run. It's an efficiency and comfort thing in the first half of the run. One thing I will say is, you're also expecting to feel good on the run because you're running and because you're a runner and maybe you ran well in training. And the first half of a triathlon doesn't feel good for anybody. So run through the not feeling good part till it feels good, rather than running really slowly, waiting for it to feel good before you run fast. Run fast while it's not feeling good, and it'll come good. That's something that brick sessions will teach you. It doesn't always feel good, doesn't ever feel good when you get off a bike and try running.
Welcome to being a triathlete.
Exactly, it is the crux of being a triathlete, really, isn't it?
Well, some fantastic questions from the guys there. I hope you guys have found it beneficial and helpful. If so, please do give video a thumbs up, give it a like. Stay tuned for more Coach's Corner, and to make sure you don't miss any of those, make sure you're subscribed just down below.